right for your appetite. Hi, I'm Karen, your Heavenly Baker, and today I'm going to be preparing for you my Aunt Mildred's special German chocolate cake. Will you join me in the kitchen? Today we're going to be making a 4-layered German chocolate cake, and as you can see we already have 2 of our 4 layers done. I've preheated the oven and we're going to make the other 2 layers for the cake. We have our chocolate buttercream, our toasted desiccated coconut, which is unsweetened by the way, and we have our toasted pecans. I usually toast my pecans in a skillet on the stove top as opposed to lying them flat on a baking sheet. I feel that I have much more control over it. It only takes probably about, I would say, 7 or 8 minutes to nicely toast your pecans. And with the coconut, I always use unsweetened coconut because I feel the sweetened coconut has so much sugar in it. So I use unsweetened coconut just to sprinkle on the top as a type of garnishing. And that actually toasts quite quickly, so you have to watch it and stir it continuously while it's toasting. I'm going to start by lining our cake tins with parchment paper. I tend to line them with parchment paper because when you release them from the cake tin, they release a lot more easily than if you just butter and flour. So what I'll do is I will first draw the outline of the cake tins with a pencil, which is very simple. And for the most part it should be, you know, the exact size of the base, but if it's a little bit smaller, that's not a problem either. Alright, you just want an approximate base circumference, and I'm going to take a little bit of butter substitute, which is a sunflower spread, and I'm going to grease the entire cake pan, or cake tin. Okay, and now I'm going to cut the parchment paper so that we can fit it into the cake tin. This is a very important step because if you don't do it, there's always a possibility that part of the cake may get stuck to the pan. So these are all steps that are quite important to take in the beginning in terms of prepping for your cake preparation. Now I'm going to be mixing the dry ingredients. So I've put my organic cocoa in here and my special gluten-free, wheat-free flour mix, some gluten-free baking powder, baking soda, a little bit of salt, and now I'm going to combine the wet with the dry. I've put some oil in here, some soya milk. You can use coconut rice milk, soya milk, almond milk, any dairy alternative, and I'm going to be adding a cup of hot water to my liquid mixture and then adding the 2. I do not need an electric mixer. I can just easily mix this particular chocolate sponge recipe with a whisk. So I've just heated some water in a kettle, and I'm going to be adding my very hot water to a cup of my very hot water to my oil and my soya milk in a plastic jug. And I will be adding a little bit of vanilla. And I'll give that a very quick mix. And I'll add it directly to my dry ingredients. Okay, and I'll just whisk that very slowly so that I'm incorporating all of the ingredients. There we go. So we've created a nice smooth batter, which is quite liquidy, but with the heat of the oven will rise nicely. Alright, so now we're ready to pour it into our 2 cake tins. Here we go. It's best to really use a spatula. Here we go. I'm setting the timer now to about 30 minutes, and the oven's been set to 180 degrees, and join me later when we're ready to assemble our German chocolate cake. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to start showing you how I frost or what the filling will be for the German chocolate cake. Although ideally we should have all 4 layers done, or all 3 or 4 layers done before we start frosting. While the other 2 are in the oven, we'll get started. I'll just take you through my technique of doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a pastry bag, one of these disposable plastic ones. I'm going to cut it at the end, and I'm going to put my tip through. Just a tip with a large round opening. As you can see, the bag is still, the opening is still too small for the tip, so we'll cut a little bit more off. It's still a little bit too small, but I prefer to cut more off a little by little rather than cutting too much off and having it be too large and then having to use another bag. And what I have here, although not very attractive, it's a large, a long plastic measuring jug, and it's very easy just to open the pastry bag, something like this, that I can use while I'm actually using a spatula and putting the frosting into the bag itself. Rather than having to hold it with one hand and doing it with another, I find it much easier to spatula my frosting directly into the bag in the following way. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push the frosting as far down as possible and twist the top. Some people tend to use rubber bands to keep this closed, but I really don't need to do that. This is fine, okay? And just release any air that might be in the bag itself. And now we're ready to get started. As you can see, I have cut the top of the cake away, which is naturally formed into a dome while baking. And it leaves the surface flat for me to be able to put the filling on it. It's very, very important. You may want to skip that step because you might not like the idea of wasting sponge. However, I tend to use a lot of that extra sponge in other types of desserts. So we're going to go ahead and just start to very simply go around our cake with our buttercream. Alright, just form a kind of spiral. This buttercream's a little bit thicker, but that's perfectly fine. We can be forgiven for that on a German chocolate cake. And now we're going to begin to spread our frosting around our cake. Okay, and I've just put it directly on the cake stand as opposed to a revolving stand that we can use, because I'd like to have it served directly from my cake stand. Alright, so now we've done that, and now we're going to take a little bit of our pecans, our toasted pecans, and we're just going to break them on top of the chocolate frosting. I'm not doing anything that's very complicated here. We don't need to break them beforehand or chop them very finely. We're just going to break them on top of our frosting of every single one of our chocolate sponge layers. Okay, we're gonna just try to spread them as much as we can all over the cake. Not huge pieces, but we're just going to break them into smaller pieces. Okay, and now we're going to take a bit of our unsweetened toasted desiccated coconut, and we are going to just kind of scatter it on top of our chocolate sponge. Now we're ready to put on another layer, our second layer. And again, we are going to pipe this onto our cake. Okay, might have to fill it up perhaps some more. Doesn't really matter if you have any little gaps here, because you can just fill them up afterwards. Okay, we need to fill the bag with more frosting. Right, let's continue to frost our cake, and we're doing a kind of spiral there, right, and with our spatula. So it's a bit of a thicker frosting. I could have added a bit of water, a bit more water to it to make it a thinner consistency, but with this particular cake, the German chocolate, it's perfectly fine. Okay, and again, we are going to take some of our pecans, break them up, and the combination of toasted pecans and toasted coconut is just wonderful. And because this is our gluten-free, wheat-free, and dairy-free version, there's some agave nectar in the actual chocolate sponge, so it's minimally sweetened. And really, I would say that the majority of sweetness is probably going to come from our chocolate icing, our buttercream frosting. Okay, so we're going to just spread these around the outer edge as well. Okay, and again we're going to scatter our desiccated coconut all over the cake. Alright? Okay, and now we're going to wait for our other two layers to bake, and then we will show you the completed German chocolate cake that came from my great Aunt Mildred. Okay. And here you have it, viewers, Aunt Mildred's decadent 4-layered German chocolate cake smothered in unsweetened desiccated coconut and toasted pecans. I cannot wait to get me a slice of this yummy cake. Until next time on The Heavenly Baker, lots of love and light.